You know, before you ever see those dramatic courtroom showdowns, every single legal battle starts quietly, on paper. And these first documents, they're called pleadings, are basically the official blueprint for the entire lawsuit. They set the rules for the whole fight, and believe me, getting them wrong can mean losing before you even start. So, let's break down how this whole thing works.
Right, so you can't just walk into a court and start arguing. It doesn't work that way. The legal system is built on a foundation of structure, and that's really to ensure fairness for everyone. And that structure, it all begins with the very first documents that get filed, a kind of formal rule book that defines the conflict right from the get-go.
So how do you make that leap? How does a personal problem, like a dispute with your landlord, actually turn into a formal case that a court can rule on? Well, the answer lies in turning your story into a very, very specific kind of legal document.
To see exactly how this works, let's just follow a really simple common scenario. So we've got Alex, who's the landlord, and Ben, the tenant. Alex is saying Ben hasn't paid rent for 3 months. It sounds like a pretty straightforward conflict, right? But to bring it to court, they both have to play by the book.
And this is where the pleadings come in. That's the official term for the first set of documents that really kick off a civil lawsuit. You can think of them as the formal opening moves in a game of legal chess.
So what does that actually mean, legally speaking? A pleading is simply the first document from each side, the plaint or the written statement. It's the foundational paperwork. And this is so important. Anything you leave out of these documents, you generally can't bring up later in court. They literally set the stage for everything that comes next.
So the whole point here is clarity. The pleadings tell the court, and maybe more importantly, they tell each other exactly what the fight is about. No surprises, no changing the story halfway through. The entire case gets defined right here, at the very beginning.
So this process has 2 main parts. The person who starts the lawsuit, we call them the plaintiff, which is Alex in our case, files a plaint. This is their side of the story. Then, the person getting sued, the defendant, who is Ben, gets to respond with something called a written statement. This is their formal defense.
But hold on, you can't just write whatever you want. This is not the place for an angry email or a long social media rant. To keep everything fair and focused, these documents have to follow 4 fundamental principles, and they're often called the golden rules of pleading.
Okay, these 4 rules are the pillars of the whole system. First, you just state what happened, not your legal argument about it. Second, you stick to only the essential facts, the stuff that really matters. Third, you present those facts, but you don't show your hand yet. You don't reveal your evidence or your proof. And finally, the whole thing has to be written clearly and to the point. Let's see what that actually looks like.
Here is a perfect example of that first rule. Alex's plaint should state this simple fact: Ben did not pay rent. It should not jump to the legal conclusion and say Ben breached the contract. See, it's the judge's job to connect the facts to the law. It's not Alex's job to do it for them in the pleading.
So why are there so many strict rules? Honestly, it all comes down to one word: fairness. This quote from Audrey's just sums it up perfectly. The whole goal is to make sure the defendant knows exactly what the plaintiff is accusing them of. The system is specifically designed to prevent a trial by ambush, where one side is just caught completely off guard.
All right, so let's see how this all comes together in practice. What would Alex's plaint and Ben's written statement actually look like? This is where the official story of the lawsuit really takes shape, point by counterpoint.
So, Alex's plaint would lay out the key facts, one by one. He'd establish he's the owner, that there was a rental agreement for a specific amount, that the rent wasn't paid for May, June, and July, and that he sent a formal notice. And finally, he states exactly what he wants the court to do: give him the back rent and order Ben to leave the property.
Okay, now it's Ben's turn. In his written statement, he has to go through Alex's points and respond to each one. So, he admits, yes, I'm the tenant. He admits, yes, I got the notice. But then, and this is crucial, he denies that he failed to pay. And then he introduces a new fact for his defense. He claims he did pay the rent, but he paid it to Alex's agent. And just like that, the battle lines for the entire case have been drawn.
Now, I know this might seem like a whole lot of rigid paperwork, but this process is absolutely essential. Pleadings are not just some formality. They are the very foundation upon which a fair and efficient legal case is built.
When you strip it all the way, pleadings really serve 2 main functions. First, they give fair notice to the other side, so everybody knows the case they have to prepare for. And second, they define the exact issues for the court.
which filters out all the extra noise and focuses the judge's attention only on what's truly in dispute.
So really, pleadings are the bedrock of any lawsuit. They define the conflict for the judge, they prevent those surprise attacks, and by narrowing the issues, they save everyone a ton of time and money. They also create a permanent official record of the dispute. They really are the blueprint for justice.
And that leaves us with one final big question. We know pleadings set the boundaries for the entire legal fight. But what happens if a mistake is made? What if a crucial fact is left out or new information comes to light after everything's been filed? If pleadings are the bedrock of a case, what happens when you find a crack in that rock? Well, that's a question for the next stage of the lawsuit.